Hello and welcome to day 2 of Radio Days, the event that Autistic Radio has every year between Christmas and New Year, the 27th, 28th, 29th, 30th of December. We have the backstage area. It's the most important part, really. Another room where there's no recording, where people can text, no cameras, and they can speak if they wish and share their thoughts about this time of the year. The catchphrase is being lonely together, and it fits really because my experience of yesterday in the backstage area was people were talking a lot about how they already feel the pain of being isolated this time between Christmas and New Year. Somebody was mentioning how they were estranged from their family, and that brought up a lot of conversations around that. It's also the time when people say that they have fewer things from their normal routines. The clubs, the things that they normally would do, that's all broken. So people were saying that maybe working through this time or finding a non-holiday version of Christmas was the best. So whatever you're feeling, feel free to join us all of the time that we're broadcasting here between 3 o'clock and 7 o'clock every day of the 4 days of Radio Days. You can find the link on the website autisticradio.com/backstage. I have a podcast to play for you today, and it's an example of what we've been doing here at Autistic Radio, cooperating with professionals to have a conversation with them. We use what we call the audio radio model, which we feel gives us a better opportunity of equity in the communication. And as you would expect, it's an audio only experience, something that's edited. And we've been engaging with the professionals that are the most controversial in the world of autism. There are various niche groups and various advocacy groups that see behaviourism as the science that led to applied behaviourism, or ABA, and that's problematic. That's a black and white issue, because ABA has in the past a long history of putting people in situations where their own identity is denied them. Now, we feel here, if there's one group of professionals that would benefit us discussing things with, it's the ABA group, the behaviourist group. If we're to say one useful thing that might improve the lives of autistic people in the future, it seems to us that it would be through the route of speaking directly to people who involve themselves in therapies and support services for autistic people using ABA. So that's where we stand, an open conversation. And I know a lot of people don't like that. A lot of people will look at what we do here and feel that we're disloyal in some way. I have an interesting podcast to play for you now, with Brian Middleton. He's also known as the bearded behaviourist. And it's going to interest some of us that Brian himself is autistic. Let's listen to that and we'll deal with some comments. Hello, it's Jules here at Autistic Radio.
I'm coming back to the contentious, difficult subject of behaviorism. Why? Because it's really important. Behaviorism doesn't go away. It gets bigger, and it has more influence, not just on the autistic community, but on the whole population.
We speak our words, we listen.
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 Today I'm going to be speaking with Brian. Brian goes under the name of Bearded Behaviorist. To introduce him, I'm going to go straight to his words from the Mindful Behavior homepage of beardedbehaviorist.com. Core values. Coaching and continuing education services to individuals working within or invested in the field of applied behavior analysis. We strive to provide neurodiversity affirming service which promote individual growth and personal-centered care. We understand that each client we work with is a unique individual, influenced by his or her culture, family values and beliefs, and also personal identity. We strive to honour and respect the uniqueness of each person that we serve. Enhancing the field of ABA first begins by examining the critical feedback, considering where and how we can do better, and then committing to personal growth in the interest of our consumers. I'll be speaking to Brian about that. But before he arrives, let's also look at what he calls the large call to action headline. Overall in our work, we seek to alleviate ableism and the harm caused to our consumers. We seek to promote a positive relationship with our consumers and stakeholders. We seek to lessen the experience of ableism and dogma that can inhibit one's enjoyment of life. We seek to help our consumers live a fulfilled, values-based life. We seek to assist clients to engage in affirming behaviours, and we seek to increase clients' sense of meaning and purpose in their career. We also endeavour to promote better functioning and satisfaction in supporting consumers. When working with clinicians, we aspire to strengthen emotional bonds and improve communication. Each coach at Mindful Behaviour has their own unique approach to mentorship. However, we share a common goal of providing quality, effective, empathetic support to the whole person. Our goal is to guide clinicians, caregivers and colleagues to address ableism inherent in our society and shape our culture to be accepting and affirming to all neurotypes. Services at Mindful Behaviour are grounded in research-based interventions and are delivered in an ethical manner, always with respect for the client and our overall consumers. Well, so much so good. We see the word strive and seek, and we see the word neuroaffirmative. Let's speak in more detail to Brian and ask him to explain further why these large call to actions need to be out there as headlines and why it's necessary to differentiate himself by quite clearly putting those as the core values from the website right in the front and center. If there is a conversation that we have to have amongst our community, it is the one about behavioral science. Behavioral science is caricatured. It lives in a space that also the bogeyman lives in. And that's a bit of a lazy way of dealing with our neurodiversity. And it's also a difficulty for us if we're ever going to have any change. Today I'm speaking with somebody who is neurodiverse and also a qualified practitioner, a research person, somebody with experience. Let's hear them describe the situation so that we don't jump to our own conclusions and leap out there first. Open up the space for Brian Middleton. Hello, Brian. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name's Brian Middleton. I'm known as the Bearded Behaviorist. I am a board-certified behavior analyst. I am also autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, dysgraphic, and I suspect that I am also dyspraxic. And I also am partially deaf.
That's a lot of labels, and I'm kind of hearing from you that you wear those labels like medals on your chest rather than having them applied to you by other people. Can you relate to that?
I wouldn't really say medals on my chest, more of like a cozy sweater. I've learned to love and accept myself for who I am, and a part of who I am is those things that happen to have labels. Those labels have helped me to understand myself a little bit better and care for myself a little bit more.
When did you start accumulating these identities? Was it early on in life?
I was struggling a lot in schooling and learning. It took me a very long time to break the code in reading. And I was very much a very awkward child. And that led my mom to seeking out and trying to find support for me. I have a particularly unusual educational upbringing in that my parents chose to homeschool me and 5 of my 6 siblings. There was a lot of things that my parents needed support with. I got identification with dyslexia, dysgraphia, and nonverbal learning disorder, which nonverbal learning disorder is a common misdiagnosis for assigned male at birth autistics. It wasn't until when I became a special education teacher and started working with autistic children and realizing that this was my childhood, obviously with differences, everybody's different, but that understanding that I was able to gain, or that I was able to come in with, really helped me be able to work with those children and support them and see them as people. I was able to get my own diagnosis with autism spectrum disorder because I had access to some materials that most people don't have access to. I was able to complete some assessments, made an appointment with my GP, showed him everything that I had done, all the materials I had gathered, and said, "Doc, I think I'm autistic. What do I need to do to get the diagnosis?" It was a bit comical because he blinked a few times and said, "You did it." And that was my journey towards diagnosis. It wasn't until after COVID that I got my ADHD diagnosis. And mostly it was because the coping mechanisms I had before were not quite working. Yeah.
That last little bit you were forced into because the masking slipped.
Yeah. The masking slipped, and also the masking in my case was compensation primarily. And when you push yourself and push yourself and push yourself, you break. I had a lifetime of going through those cycles of what I call boom and bust, where basically I'd be really successful and then things would fall apart. I needed additional support, the support that an ADHD diagnosis and access to the appropriate medications could bring. And it's made a big difference.
I'm quite experienced in listening to people through my headphones. And I have a lovely compliment to give you. The beautiful thing I'm getting from you, Brian, is a comfortability with where you sit. And the fluency, the owning of where you are in life. And that's at the same time as being in a controversial space. You are both neurodivergent and you are a behaviorist. When did behaviorism join the party for you?
My early introduction to it was in my undergraduate work and being certified as a teacher. I have 2 undergraduates, one in special education, one in social sciences, and the special education degree. I also have a master's of education with an administrative endorsement. And there's a little bit of behaviorism that came in through PBIS and positive behavior supports and that sort of thing. But my real introduction to behaviorism came when, as a special education teacher who, according to other people, I was working miracles with the children I was supporting. And the reason for those supposed miracles was I was using the novel concept of treating them like people. That was sarcasm for those who didn't catch that. But there were still things that were slipping through the gaps. And there were still areas where children were struggling and I was struggling and my staff were struggling. And so I tried to seek answers. And as luck would have it, I came across a regional conference for autism where the presenter was a board certified behavior analyst. Her talk enthralled me. And I spoke with her for the remainder of the conference after her talk was done, skipping all of my classes. And she introduced me to the concept of behaviorism. And that was the beginning at the beginning. But it's most certainly not the end, because there was more to the story than just that, including the later discovery of the very dark history of behaviorism, a dark history that I want to make sure that I am acknowledging and make sure that we are not hiding or pretending is not there.
Okay. I'm an amateur. My job is to ask questions, not know the answers. An amateur's experience of behaviorism is usually through ABA, and it's usually from witnessing technicians at relatively low levels of education, besides their qualifications in behaviorism. I'm not demeaning that. Dealing with children directly. And when I have been exposed to watching training and watching the videos where people are explaining how to deal with children better, I can't help but empathize with the child. I can't help but see the child trying to communicate different things, but feel that the child is being ignored and the child is being overridden. It looks to me very much as though the wide group of people who are actually applying behaviorism don't get us as a group of individuals, or don't get us as a difference from society. Could you give me more information on how you feel about that?
Yeah. What you described, what you observed, is supremacism in action. That is the medical model and the moral model of disability, which is a way of viewing disability. It's not describing the medical system, it's or industries. It is the medical model of disability and the moral model of disability frame how we perceive disability. And the way that disability has been shaped within radical behaviorism, that's the name of the philosophy and science that informs applied behavior analysis. was heavily shaped by Ivar Lovaas and his peers, and their unquestioning acceptance of the pathology paradigm, which those two models of disability I mentioned cover. And the pathology paradigm, put simply, and this is coming from Dr. Nick Walker, who is an autistic psychologist. She is a heavy contributor towards the neurodiversity movement, so I highly recommend her work, especially her book, Neuroqueer Heresies. She's the one who introduced me to the pathology paradigm. The pathology paradigm portrays disability as being a pathogen, a thing that resides within the person but is separate from the person, that must be cured, fixed, recovered from, exercised, if you
Sorry.
will.
This sounds like evil spirits. Are you saying that modern scientists view disability as though they have been taken over by evil spirits as a metaphor?
Yeah. In fact, within behaviorism, we actually refer to this as a mentalism, a homunculi or circular logic, if you will, that explains away what's happening. If I were to say, I drink because I'm thirsty. Well, thirsty is simply a word describing the fact that I desire water. So it's a circular logic. But if I say I drink because I have not had water for a while, that is not circular logic. That is very, very clear and expected. This is the thing that is simultaneously baffling, but also in some ways understandable, because we're looking at the culture of the time, and we have to understand culture impacts behavior. It's baffling that behavioral scientists who very clearly fall underneath what's called the functional contextual umbrella of behavior science. Behavior analysis is not the only behavior science. I want to be clear on this. We are functional contextualists, which is also what neurologists and other psychologists are. There's many others. Occupational therapists and speech therapists also fall underneath the functional contextual umbrella. But Lovaas et al. Accepted without question the concept or idea that disability must be cured. And it is very clear in Lovaas's work, because the criteria for his success that he specified was indistinguishable from their peers, which, by the way, was the exact same criteria that was utilized for the Riker and Lovaas article that kicked off conversion therapy. Queer folks have been very pathologized over the years, and this very much applies to them as well. The attitudes, the ways in which experiences that diverge from the accepted norm. That's very important. That's what neurodivergent means. It does not mean diverging from typical development. It's diverging from accepted norms. This pathologizing, this imagining that it's something that must be exorcised, like bringing in some sort of priest and the demon must be pulled out, has led to industrialization of suffering.
I did not interrupt there. Your flow was passionate, and you could not have made things clearer. I'm an amateur pragmatist. It's clear to me that at the moment, ABA and its history is being used by parts of the established, let's call them community, of people who have realized their neurodiversity for a long time and have set themselves up into opposition against everything that has the word behaviorist in it. For me, that's also a big problem. I'm a curious man. I feel that part of my autism is about not accepting things on face value and not allowing myself to be pulled along with whatever group tries to pull me along. Are we yet at a position where we can let go of behaviorism as a bogeyman, something to give us strength to fight against, and try to understand a little bit more about the behaviorist science inquiry of, and try to understand the behaviorist science inquiry into the human condition? Or do we have to still keep pushing back so hard against the misuse of behaviorist principles and leave it so there's no room for compromise? Where do we stand now as politics?
I really want to say one of my favorite Spanish phrases, which is "Por qué no las dos?", which means why not both? And the reason I say that is because the issue is the paradigm. The issue is the paradigm by which the behaviorist community is operating. And paradigms are a series of assumptions that allow science to move forward without having to start from square one every single time. And paradigms can be very big, and they can also be very, very small. The paradigm of pathology versus the functional contextual paradigm, they are seemingly small, and yet they are incredibly massive in how they impact perception. So to answer your question of, is there room for communication and collaboration? Yes, most definitely. And there is also room for pushing back against the pathology paradigm approaches. And what better way to reference that than by an entire institution focused on ethics, the Kennedy Institute of Ethics Journal, and an article titled "Ethical Concerns with Applied Behavior Analysis for Autism Spectrum Disorder," and the word disorder is in quotes. Published by Wakefield and McCarthy in 2020. I will paraphrase the work of the authors. Please read the article. I highly recommend. I can provide you with a copy. The summarization that the authors make is that the justification for the use of the dominant species of applied behavior analysis, note that phrasing, dominant species, it's not justified because it violates the right of the autistic children who are subjected to it. And I choose my words carefully there when I say subjected. I mean that when I say that. When the pathology paradigm is in the driver's seat of the science, that's where we see ableism. That's where we see dehumanization. That's where we see people like Ivar Lovaas saying that, well, you see an autistic person, they've got all the things that you need to be a person. I'm paraphrasing him here, but it's pretty close to the quote. They have skin, hair, teeth, limbs, but they don't have everything that's needed to be a person. And the purpose of treating autism is to make them a person. If you're not horrified by that, and that was not a perfect quote, I definitely recommend looking up the original quote. But if you're not horrified by that, then what's wrong with you? What happened to you to not see how absolutely dehumanizing that entire approach is? And so we need to be uncompromising when it comes to the pathologizing of any disability, not just autism, but any type of intellectual disability, any type of physical disability, psychological disabilities. We need to be horrified by that dehumanization. And we need to push not just away from the dehumanization, but towards a humanistic approach, towards the understanding that disability is a verb. It happens. It's an interaction between the individual and the environment, and that every single human who has ever been born has experienced disability, because every single one of us has been an infant.
And we will become disabled again as we get older. I'm 59. I can currently walk up the stairs carrying a rucksack 2x2, but I know that my knees gradually will mean that I will be using some kind of walking implement in my life.
Exactly.
However, disabled is used as a noun. It's been used as a noun in the past, and it has been used in the noun in the past in such a way as to take us into eugenics and take us into the removal of people from society. It looks to me as though behaviorism is very much part of that. It looks to me as though behaviorism is the powerful inquiry that gives the nasty people the opportunity to make differentiation. Let me background it. It's the power, but it has to be used carefully. And at the moment, it looks as though it's being used for inappropriate things. You know, gun doesn't kill people, people kill people, that kind of thing, you know?
So the answer is yes and. And yes and is a wonderful phrase because it allows for us to acknowledge what is and expand and understand more. And my friend Jeff Newman and I wrote an article for the Functional Contextualist newsletter, which is a free newsletter you can subscribe to on LinkedIn. And the article, I'm going to spoil it a little bit. It makes the comparison of institutionalization historically, which has been a problem all around the world, still is a problem in many places in the world. It makes a comparison of institutionalization of getting the quote uglies, unquote, out of the public eye, and what Ivar Lovaas and his peers did, which was to transfer institutionalization from being a place where you put people to instead be a place where people are conditioned to live. Autistic masking is real. Neurodivergent masking is real. And it is conditioned. And and it's conditioned both, it can be conditioned intentionally, and it can just be conditioned naturally. But it all has to do with very aversive environments that are unjust towards that particular individual, very rigid environments, which is intriguing to me because we autistics are often accused of being rigid, and yet nothing is more rigid than a neurotypical who's had their imagined rules that are unspoken that we must pick up without them telling us being broken.
Okay. I really, there's a subtlety there in this concept of masking that I think an awful lot of the discussion about masking doesn't pick up on. An awful lot of the time, the way masking is described is it's described as something that we are responsible for, that our pretense at normal is what we are doing. But you're clearly saying there two different mechanisms why people end up in a masking situation. It's either enforced upon you by rules through schools and through different training and different what you have to do because you are told explicitly what you have to do in certain circumstances, or it's acquired, and it's acquired by our own observation and our own adaptation to the world around us. It's not part of how we were born, is it? It's described often as part of what neurodiversity is, that we are a shady group of people that are almost duplicitous in our masking because we are covering up somehow. But the reality is it is enforced upon us in one of those two mechanisms, isn't it?
Yes. Just a little humorous observation. The way you described us that last little bit, it sounds like we're the Illuminati, as in autism. That might have to become a t-shirt. Okay, so within radical behaviorism, which is the name of the philosophy and science behind applied behavior analysis, the assumption is that there are three things that control behavior. Phylogeny, which is synonymous with nature. Ontogeny, which is synonymous with learning, psychology, and culture. And all of those things interact. The concept of the blank slate has been debunked so thoroughly from behaviorists, from neurologists, from other psychologies, all of which fall underneath the functional contextual umbrella of science, functional contextual scientists, or functional contextual behavior scientists, if you will. And masking is a behavioral repertoire. It's not one behavior, it's a series of behaviors, and each person's mask is different. Masking is not exclusive to autistics. There are other types of masking that other people do. And masking is a survival response. It is something that the individual is conditioned to do over a period of time to be able to make it through, to avoid harm. So to place the blame for masking, and that is the way that a lot of people describe it, is like, well, why can't you just be authentic? Like it's like somehow a choice. To place the blame of masking on the person who is masking is to wear the most amazing rose-tinted glasses that ignores every other thing that's happening in the environment, and to look at masking as a pathology, just like autism is viewed as a pathology, as something that is either a moral or failing or a medical failing in some way, shape, or form. Instead of seeing it for what it is, which is a response to conditions.
It's masking is at the crux of the difficulty in lots of situations when we're talking about ABA, because ABA, when it's down to the level of services that are helping parents to fix their kids because their kids are inappropriate for their society and the parents are at their wits' end and they want to do anything to normalize their children in the hope that their children will benefit and become successful in society on the basis of them being normalized. But then on the other side, I've got an anecdote about an autistic-only space, a conference, Autscape, here in the UK. I had good hopes for Autscape, but I've had some bad experiences. And one of them was about masking, because I was in a small chat space and I said a simple sentence that I said that when I traveled, I masked up to get myself from one side of security to the other side of security. And I saw that as a way of saying what I do is I take on the necessary behavior for those seconds to go through security so that I don't look like a terrorist. Because as a rather odd, eccentric individual, I can present as some kind of risk if I'm not careful. So wearing a mask through that, to me, is an acquired skill. And an individual just took that information and was triggered by that to the degree that they brought in their trauma, and they made a formal complaint, an upheld formal complaint, that somebody from the outside had suggested that they should mask. Now, the anecdote there just shows the sensitivity people have around the concept of masking. And it's almost ideological that we should never mask, even if we are using it ourselves as a practicality to get from one side of the world to the other. I don't know what my question is. I'm just going to shut up.
I hear the question, and my response to those people who say that you should not mask, that no true Scotsman, that a true neurodivergent person would not mask. That is a very privileged position to be operating from. It's a privileged position that I could definitely take advantage of if I took that approach. But I have friends, I have loved ones who are Black, who have to mask and have to code switch, which is similar to masking, but not the same thing. But I have neurodivergent Black friends where it is a matter of life or death, because some angry white woman will get upset because this Black man is behaving unusually and will call the cops. And one of those friends recently mourned the loss of a family member due to violence. This is very real, and it is very visceral. And people do not have the privilege to say that they cannot mask. Operating and living in an environment where you do not have to mask, where you can tell somebody else that there's something wrong with them, that is moral model of disability, by the way, right there inside of the neurodiversity community. Telling them that they should not mask, they are not allowed to mask. That is very privileged. And it's hard for me to say this because I want a world where we do not have to mask. I want a world where masking as a concept is ancient history, where people can be as authentic and real as they want to be. I want a world where autistic children do not have to worry about some stranger coming into their home and effectively manipulating and coercing them into putting on an act, and doing it so thoroughly that the child compensates and compensates and compensates to the point of exhaustion and burnout years and years later. Masking is not good and masking is not bad. It's something that happens. How we address it is we look at how long and to what effect. The circumstance you described in personality research, because I explore outside of behavior analysis a lot, in personality research, the number one thing that has been concluded about personalities is that environment impacts personality, and that people's personalities change based off the environment they're in. One could argue that the type of masking you described is a, quote, personality shift, unquote, that allows for you to be able to make your way through. It's a toleration response. You've learned to tolerate to get through a situation where there is danger. You're responding to the stimulus in the environment and moving through it. And that's not necessarily the same class of masking as the person who reported you and got upset with you, because the masking that that person was probably thinking of was continuous, ongoing. And I empathize with that person, because that's a process that I've been going through to learn how to unmask for myself. And we need to make sure that we're not bringing supremacism back into the conversation unintentionally by pushing our experiences on others, because that is at the heart of all of this. At the heart of the pathologies paradigm is supremacism. It's the idea that one group or one experience, one way of being is supreme and right, and any other that does not apply to it is wrong.
Yeah, I also empathize with the person who ended up using that, misconstruing what I was saying purposefully, because what they were needing to do was to take that for their own needs, their own attention, and that means that they're in a difficult place. So I of course I move away from that immediately. Our conversation today is enough for people to listen to. For goodness sake, it's a hard conversation that we've had. I look at the time on the I look at the time and it says 52 minutes up there. In the edit, we're going to be down to 40-ish. I think it would be better, if you don't mind, if I asked to take up some more of your time on another occasion. Would you be willing to do that?
Certainly.
That's really generous of you. Let's give ourselves a break from this conversation and return to it another day. Let's not try and do everything all today.
Just for context, I'm on a little bit of a roll today because I just recorded a podcast with Diverge podcast, which is an autism neurodiversity podcast that focuses a lot on pathological demand avoidance. So
great. Advertise it. Give me the deals. Tell people about that. You know, if there's any other good stuff out there, let's tell people about it.
These conversations, I think, energize me because I am not an optimist and I am not a pessimist. I'm a realist. The pessimist must, by their very philosophical assumptions, exclude all data that goes in favor of the optimist view. And the optimist, likewise, must exclude all data that supports the pessimist view. The realist says yes and. The realist looks at what's happening and accepts what's happening. And this is, I think, the way through is to yes and it, to afford each other our humanity, to be willing to invest. And for me, that investment is very, very exciting, because that investment can bring clarity, it can bring understanding, it can bring compassion for ourselves, compassion for others. It's funny because people think that I like conflict. And I don't like conflict. I like the resolution that comes on the other side of conflict. But what I absolutely hate is the absolute loneliness and isolation of the autism mom who thinks that in order for her to have value, she must somehow tokenize her child's autism, because she herself is marginalized and left out, because she has real struggles that people are not willing to acknowledge unless she uses her child as some sort of bandage or badge or shield to hide behind, or perhaps even a sword to lash out against others. I have great compassion for that parent. I have great compassion and care for the professional who, imagining themselves some sort of savior, walks in to an assessment with an autistic child and proceeds to start talking about how, well, we need to make them do functional play, and we need to make sure that they can be recovering from autism and XYZ, and insert all the pathologizing language and all the ways that we basically dehumanize each other. I feel compassion for that person because they don't realize the harm that they're doing. And I feel compassion for my peers who either just started going through or going through the journey of self-discovery and having that thought, I know what's wrong with me, and then realizing that even that thought is wrong, because there's nothing wrong with you. There's never been anything wrong with you. You've always been the perfect being, complete and whole as you are. And the thing that has been wrong has been an environment that has repeatedly told you that there is something wrong with you. I have compassion for all of those people because I've been in some way, shape, or form, not all of those people precisely, but sort of those people in different ways. I've experienced that myself. I've been the teacher that's been pathologizing the child. I've been the caregiver who has thought of themselves as some sort of savior or person that must be there and center themselves in some way, shape, or form. I am the person who is going through the process of discovery. And I spend so much of my time teaching and sharing and helping people to see each other, to look past the masks that we create for each other and truly see the living, breathing, struggling, loving, excited, fearful human being. We need to have that. Otherwise, we're going to fall into a pendulum swing. The pendulum swing always hurts people, and the people it hurts the most are the most vulnerable. And the only way that we can truly exercise our free will, our agency, is to intentionally choose to see the person. Even as we say, this behavior is unacceptable, not autistic behavior. I'm referring to pathologizing and dehumanizing behavior.
Fucking hell. You just heard that. You just heard that from Brian Middleton, the behaviorist, the bearded behaviorist, here on Autistic Radio. Get back here another time, Brian, and make more recordings with us.
I would love to.
Autistic Radio is about us, it's for us, and it's from us. Autistic Radio is about you, it's for you, and it can be from you. We have every single Sunday Drop-In, 4:44 p.m. every Sunday. Wow. I haven't listened to that for a little while now. And I have to say I found that quite an intense listen myself. It felt as though we densely put into a nutshell the whole concept of autistic identity and where it comes into conflict with the pathology of the model that is resurgent, the model of the broken autistic person, the pendulum as it was described, swinging back against an understanding of people as themselves, as individuals. It's a hard listen, and maybe most people will listen to snap pieces of that. maybe we should break it down into 3 podcasts. I'm looking at my colleagues here, and I'm looking at some of the texts, and they're saying that this recording blew them away at the time. Another person saying such honest stuff. Another person saying the whole thing is exhausting. Yeah. We do need to address this, don't we? This question about our identity coming into conflict with the need for society to classify us as disabled or dysfunctional or medically unfit in some way. There are needs in our societies for those processes. But we have the need to express ourselves as an identity, but not just a collective identity, also a personal identity. So often we create this sense of a collective identity out there in the autism scene that then conflicts with our own personal identities as well. I wonder if anybody here has a feeling that they want to speak out before I finish this recording.
Yes. Sorry. I felt really like there was a lot there to take in, and I think I would just have to listen to that a couple of times before I fully managed to sort of understand it. But all the way through, I was thinking to myself that as a late diagnosed person who had lived quite a long life before ever getting a diagnosis, that there is nothing unnatural about that masking process. It was just, it was in me there before I knew. It was in me there when I was 5 years old and sat in the classroom. It was with me when I was 16 and going out and feeling uncomfortable. So I didn't learn it. I really didn't learn it from anywhere else. I got it naturally because that is the way I coped. And I think maybe he's got a point. Maybe everybody masks to a certain extent, and if you're in a situation you can't quite handle, maybe that's what you do. But I think that masking and trying to be part of the crowd just came as a natural knee-jerk reaction.
Do you want to respond to that, Jules, or will I read out what I put in the text?
Whatever feels right to you, mate. I'm looking at what you've got in the text there, and I'm guessing that what you're saying at the beginning is the collective space that's autistic right now here, you, me, and Lucy in this space, is the autistic radio space that you begin with on that idea. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's also making me remember what we discussed once as like the unspoken rules.
Flesh it out for me, mate.
But what I'm extending that out into is a response to what you just said there and what Lucy said, and this feeling that someone who's in full flow, an autistic person perhaps in full flow, can be quite exhausting because they've been given an opportunity to go for it, yeah, and they're comfortable and they're letting it all out. And sometimes we find out we can demand the neurotypical world respects our sensitivities because it can be too intense on a sensory level. But also in an autistic environment with people who identify as autistic or neurodivergent individuals, we have to respect that of each other there too. That when we can get going, we can get going. And I think we can read it often in each other, but I'm just that's where I would flesh that out. If I speak anymore, I'm going to lose my thread.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. We as autistic people tend to communicate in this long paragraph, intense way. And that in itself is something hard to handle, whether you're autistic or whether you're not autistic. And I find things in my environment hard to handle. And one of the things is other people communicating in the way that I communicate, which is long sentences.
Yeah, exactly. Is this being recorded? Yeah, because I want to note something down for myself because I can't find a pen and paper. You spoke about the long paragraph of communication, and that's something in a person I'm reading just now, this French author. It's like how he hones in on that moment before you think and identifies a subject who gives meaning to what's happening in your life, right? So, and the way he does it is to go into convoluted paragraphs in a sentence after sentence about absolutely nothing really. But so I just want to note that in myself. Now I'll go and find a pen and paper.
Well, in the second hour of today's broadcasting, we're going to look at another podcast from this year. I'll see you on the other side.